Good evening, everyone. This is a meeting of the Mad River Valley Planning District Steering Committee. The date is July 17th, 2025. It is 7 p.m. The first item on the agenda is a call to order. We've called the meeting to order. Second item is adjustments to the agenda. Does anyone have any adjustments to the agenda?
No.
Third item is public comment. Do we have any members of the public here who wish to comment? Hearing none, let's go to 4, the acceptance of the minutes from the June 19th, 2025 MRVPD Steering Committee meeting. Do we have a
Can we
quorum
vote on
to
that?
do this, or maybe?
I don't think we can.
I don't think we can either, yeah. I will have to move to the next one, item 5. I should just say for the record, we do not have a quorum yet. Hopefully, we'll have another member joining, and then we can return to item 4 and vote on it. So that will be an adjustment to the agenda. We'll move the voting on the acceptance of the minutes to the end of the meeting. So let's go on to staff report, item number 5. Sam, please.
Sounds good. So as you might notice, Josh is not here, so I'll mainly be talking about projects that I've been working on a lot. But there's some interesting things to note. The first thing I wanted to touch on is something that we talked about 2 meetings ago, and then we haven't really revisited since, which is talking about the road policy study, and just to provide some context for those who don't know, Facein in July of 2024 had a lot of damage on the July 10th floods. And through the FEMA process, they learned that based on their existing road policies, certain reimbursement requests that they made were denied by FEMA. There were 2 particular instances. One was kind of intermunicipal aid. Waitsfield helped the town by providing road crew support. And because there was no like formal mutual aid agreement, and Facein Waitsfield didn't formally invoice Facein for that work that was provided, FEMA denied those claims because they were essentially like, well, Waitsfield's already paid their road crew, so there's nothing to reimburse. Is that?
Yeah, and just to be clear, Warren did help out as well.
Oh, Warren did help, okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we had no.
Stan?
You're right.
Yes.
So
Thank you.
basically, that was not covered.
It
And
wasn't me, but you know, full of skill.
and then there was also certain private infrastructures, smaller culverts that needed to be replaced in order to access some of the public roads.
Yes.
So the town made the decision that for the greater good to access those public roads, they were gonna replace the private culverts. And because that was not a policy written into their road policies, those claims were also denied. So we had this discussion about whether there'd be interest for the planning district to do kind of an analysis of the existing road policies in the other towns. And talk to agency or, organizations like Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and then look at FEMA documentation to kind of understand some potential amendments, additions, or just kind of best practices for road policies moving forward to make sure that Warren or Waitsfield don't see similar things in future flood events. So where we're at right now is I've done a bit of research. I talked with Vermont League of Cities and Towns. I have kind of a memo that we've drafted up. It's essentially ready to go, but I kind of buttoned it up shortly before Josh had left out of town, and then he's been dealing with some health stuff, so he hasn't had a chance to get eyes on it. I was hoping to have it ready for tonight, but I can either email it out once Josh has a chance to look at it or provide it at another meeting.
Oh, okay, a question for you on that. So last week, we received, maybe all the towns did, I don't know, a note from Keith, is it
Mhm.
Cubbin?
Keith Cubbin, yep.
Yeah, Southern Vermont, Regional Planning Commission.
Yep.
They put together a multi-page document
Oh, really?
for what it looks like is a regional mutual aid agreement. And I sent a copy of it to Josh because I didn't know if he was aware of it, number one. I probably should have copied you on it.
It's okay.
And
I'd be
then
interested to see it, but
just asking him if it was something that could be incorporated into what you guys are doing or replace it. It's full of legalese. And when I read it, I said, I don't think our town would participate without going through our attorney first to
Mhm.
look at it. But I did send it to Josh last week, so you may want to take a look at that too, see how it may play into what you put together.
Yeah, that sounds sounds great, to be
Okay.
honest, because I'm not really a lawyer either. It might be better to use than what I've come up with, but
Yeah.
that's something that we've been working on over the last like couple weeks.
Yeah,
So combination of either, just using CVRPCs or potentially taking a look at both, we can see.
yeah,
But it's just for town consideration, so that'll be available for people to look at, and like, I'm hoping not too long, maybe like a week or so,
okay.
once Josh gets back. Another similar item I just wanted to touch on is, some members of the town of Wastefield over like the last couple months had been curious about the potential impacts of a local options tax. I think right now it's just kind of in like preliminary, trying to understand like if we decided to do this, what would it actually look like? So planning district staff have been helping them understand that. We're drafting like a similar style memo that explores a couple different scenarios, like if you were to impose it on meals and alcohols, maybe, or maybe just rooms. What would it look like if we imposed it on everything? So thankfully, we have a lot of this data already collected, but I also reached out to the Department of Taxes to understand like the proportion of revenue that could be generated from things like online sales, because those are destination based. So if someone were to purchase something from Amazon and the end destination is in Waitsfield, and if Waitsfield had a local options tax, then that would also be subject to the local options tax. They don't have that level of data for communities that don't currently have a local options tax in place. So I've reached out to the state to get data from communities that I thought would be similar to ours. So that'll be incorporated too, just so we kind of have the full picture.
Do you know if those destinations are determined by zip codes? And I'm only asking because as
That's-
you know, we got Wakefield and Moretown.
That's one question I don't have an answer to, which Josh and I have discussed.
Yeah,
I don't know exactly what that would look like. I've been trying to get, I was on the phone with one person from the Department of Taxes like a week and a half ago, and she was able to get me these reports, and I've been going back and forth with another member of her team. He's more on like, it sounded like he was more on like the policy side of things, whereas this first person I talked to was more of like the statistician data side. So I'm hoping that he can answer some of those questions for me, but I don't really know how that works out at this
okay,
point.
okay. Hey, Eric.
So that's another thing that is just should be, I'm hoping that'll be done like early August for people to take a look at. I know we won't be meeting in August, so we could either send it out and have people get first impressions or just talk about it in September. Now moving on to some of the project-based things, I just wanted to provide a couple updates.
Could I ask the question?
yeah.
Sorry, Eric, since you just walked in. Discussions of local options taxes. Have you heard anything about, do you have?
I'm sorry, if I start twitching out on that, sorry,
Why would you think that?
because I've been down this road quite a few times and I'm like a little,
All right,
I'm triggered.
never mind.
No, what do you need to know?
Well, I'm just,
And this would be different than the first time.
the first
Yeah.
one was a fiasco. I
'Cause it
felt
wouldn't be-
like, because we didn't have a clear usage scenario, and I think that really set people off.
Yeah,
Or
this-
the usage was just, we're gonna do affordable housing, and people were like, well,
What does that mean?
Mhm.
and what's in it for me, I think, where if you give something that's in it that, people can see that they're gonna get something from, maybe it's a different conversation. So anyway, never mind, let's not talk about it.
I'm really fine.
Get yourself-
I'm
Get
half
yourself
kidding.
settled, get yourself settled, have a drink, relax.
welcome, man.
Welcome. Sorry, Sam, I interrupted.
You're
there.
good.
Yeah, I thought the ambulance call was bad. This is great.
The next thing I just wanted to talk about was the Vermont or Medgar Valley Active Transportation Corridor project. So this, as far as I'm aware, the scoping study is still being reviewed by V-Trans. I haven't received an edited version, so I'm hoping that'll come soon. But some news is, in June, we got the blessing from the town of Warren to submit an application to the Vermont or V-Trans Bike and Pedestrian Program. So we submitted design and construction funding last Friday for segment 1, which I was trying to print out a couple maps if anyone's interested in seeing, but the one that you can see proposed segment one is kind of towards the beginning. This map was not the intended map, but it shows like the regional connectivity. But the request was for $2 million to construct a off-road shared use path from Warren Village to Riverside Park.
I'm on that.
And I just wanted to highlight, I mean, obviously, we just submitted the application, so we don't know if we'll get the funding, but if we do, it'd be a really huge step in the project, just because this 1 mile connection would effectively create a 3 mile off-road connection based on the other existing trails in the area. And while we weren't able to, the initial goal was for Allison and Shane, we were hoping to co-locate the first segment with some construction that's gonna occur next spring for the wastewater project. We weren't able to do that because of some of the federal regulations surrounding this funding source. But we're still hoping to build something. We're still hoping to, the Matter of Path mainly is hoping to secure private funding to still construct that 1 mile section where it says wastewater co-location. So there'll be if that were to happen, there's a lot of ifs, but if all that were to happen, we'd have just like a 1/2 mile gap separating Warren and Waitsfield. So hopefully we'll get this grant. I think it'd be a really cool step in the project, and it would be kind of a great exhibit section to drum up some more excitement for the rest of the corridor. And then another quick area I'll touch on is we've been working with the town of Warren on a couple exciting things. The first being we're helping the town put in an application for a neighborhood development area designation. So NDAs, they call them, help support mixed use development in walkable downtown or villages and downtown centers, or I'm mixing up the designations, but basically in state designated centers, they help promote mixed use development. So we're looking at putting in that application in early August, late July. We had a meeting with the Agency of Commerce and Community Development this week to just kind of go over the application and mapping so far, and seemed like pretty promising that it'll all work out. They're going to take a deeper dive and review maybe next week or the following week and give us feedback that we'll incorporate, but hoping to get that all passed through by sometime this fall. And kind of coupled with that project is, as many of you know, the town of Warren is hoping to move their town garage from where it's currently sited, which is just below the Warren Elementary School in the village, and moving it to Von Brown Road. So what that would mean is a really prime area right in the village center would be open for some sort of development. The town is hoping for some sort of housing development to go there, because it's right next to mixed use trails, walkable to the village center, right next to the school. So it seems like a really cool opportunity to put something really great there. So we visited the planning commission a couple times to just talk about different opportunities as far as funding for planning grants. So a couple opportunities we're exploring in that realm are Vermont Housing and Conservation Board feasibility fund. So providing funding, small scale funding up to $20,000 to assess essentially, is this project feasible? We did have a meeting with VHCB last month, or earlier this month, and they told us that this project is a good fit, but maybe not right now. They wanted us to have a little bit more information regarding like the size of the structure, number of units, general idea of costs, which we don't really have that yet, just because we still are very much in like the assessing the feasibility phase. Also a couple other things, they want kind of confirmed letter of interest from a housing organization like Downstreet, someone that would essentially ensure the perpetual affordability. That's one of the requirements of VHCB funding, and you need to have someone that at least expresses this is the kind of project that we would be interested in. And they also want to see that you're leveraging other funding. So on that note, they suggested that we go to pursue funding from the Vermont Community Development Program. They also have a planning grant. It's a little bit more relaxed in some ways, because they do have income eligibility requirements, but they're a little bit more relaxed than VHCB, for instance. you need to have 51% of the housing units at 80% area median income. So slightly below the area median income for about half the housing units. So it gives a little bit of flexibility, in the sense of like, if maybe you were not gonna go work with someone like Down Street, it has more incentive for maybe a private developer to get involved. I think that the town is interested in having it be attainable housing, but I think open to how that might happen. Feel free to chime in, Dan, if you want. Okay. And it's a higher funding limit, so that program you can secure up to $60,000. And then we also have had meetings with Down Street just actually earlier today, so it's not in the staff report. So I think going after the VCDP money, putting in an application, which would be decided upon by next June, would be a great first step. And then we could see if things progress with Down Street, maybe we do want to look into the feasibility fund as well. So that's a pretty exciting project. I've been really enjoying that, working on that, so happy to help the town in any way that I can.
Well, we're grateful for your participation and assistance. I guess the only things I'd add are, with the select board so focused on the town garage. Planning and mobilizing support. It's really sort of the housing portion it's really sort of a planning commission initiative to try, I mean, there's always the temptation of let's just sell the land to the highest bidder. So to try to make a case for, well, wait a second, this is a rare opportunity to have a couple acres come up right in the center of the village, owned by the town. We could do more. And make the case. And one of the exciting, listening to Down Street, it's interesting, they're looking for, what did they say, 20 to 30 unit scale, maybe it was even 25, so fairly large scale project. Where was I going with this? Oh, but they said basically for each unit, you can count on $1,000 of tax each year. So, I mean, one of the cases, like just from this meeting today, we can bring back to the select board is sure, maybe you could sell the parcel for X, but there's a revenue stream if we do it this, of course, there'd be a tax stream the other way too, but anyway, early days, but exciting.
Mhm.
And thank you, Sam, for all your help.
Yeah, no problem. That's pretty much all I wanted to touch on, unless there are any specific questions from the report. Happy to talk about anything else as well.
Anyone have any questions for Sam? No. Nope. Okay. Well, I guess we could either move back to the acceptance of the minutes, or we could move forward to the new business. Any sense, Chuck, how you'd like to?
Let's
proceed?
do the minutes.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, thank you.
For
Do we have a
minutes.
second? All in favor of accepting the minutes of 2/19?
Aye.
Aye, all 4 people are in favor. I see no one who can oppose or abstain, so the minutes are passed. Okay, thank you. Let's move on to item number 6. 6, you were the 4th. You were, yeah, that's a
I
fantastic,
figured that.
fantastic 4th.
So we're so glad you came.
Yeah. This was it. We could vote on something. Next 2 items are in new business. A, we have Flood Safety Act 121, Education and Outreach. I'm guessing you folks are here. I'm Dan Raddock, from the Warren Planning Commission. I apologize, I don't believe I know either of you.
That's
So-
okay.
So please introduce
Well,
yourselves.
We can, take that opportunity. So,
Okay.
my name's Allison, for those of you I haven't met yet. I work for Lake Champlain Sea Grant. And so we've teamed up with the Nature Conservancy to do some of, the education and outreach around Act 121, but I'll let Shane introduce himself.
Shane
You
Jake
had
with.
a job. I thought you just skied.
Oh, Shane,
It's funny, I was thinking the same thing here.
Shane, I have seen you speak. I apologize.
That's
We've
okay.
met at some meeting.
Okay, maybe you were at the theater when that's the last time, that was the most recent time.
No, I think it was the one before
You might
that.
have got dog food.
Yeah, yeah,
It was a-
going to get some dog food on the way home. Keep that on the down low, that's like the dog food business. Yeah, so with the Nature Conservancy, we were, the Nature Conservancy was one of several organizations that were strongly supportive of the Flood Safety Act in the legislative session. So we have continued supporting the act and supporting ANR and its administration of the act by engaging with Sea Grant, who have been great partners they do a fantastic job with outreach and education. In conducting these sort of outreach and education, we'll get into more of the details.
Yeah.
In the presentation, and yeah. so,
Yeah, and the reason we're here is both, yes, we're doing education and outreach about this, but we also want public input. So we want to know what your questions, your comments, your concerns about this are. So there's a kind of formal way you can do it at the end. We have a form, but I can also just take notes on questions that you all have. But essentially, yes, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Lake Champlain Sea Grant,
Mhm.
when you have a moment, could you tell me about? the
Sure,
organization?
sure, yes. So Lake Champlain Sea Grant, we are, there's 34 sea grants around the country, usually in coastal states, hence the sea, SEA. And we're housed under NOAA, but essentially we are a kind of partnership between the University of Vermont. And we're kind of like the extension service for water resources. So UVM has extension for agriculture. We do education and outreach around water related issues. And so we generally keep our work within the Lake Champlain Basin. So Vermont and New York, we have staff over at SUNY Plattsburgh. I'm based over at the University of Vermont. But yes, thank you for that.
No,
reminder.
thank you for explaining.
Yeah, so just to kick things off here, we're gonna be talking about flooding. We're gonna kind of set the stage for why this act has passed and kind of the rationale behind some of the things that are in it. But just to set some context, I think it's important to remember that flooding is the most common and costly recurring hazard in Vermont. And actually it's the most deadly natural hazard in the United States. So we definitely have seen that recently, and I think it's good to acknowledge what is going on in the rest of our country right now, which is a sad reality of kind of where we're at right now. But Vermont does have some unique characteristics that do make us especially vulnerable to flooding. I'm sure it's not much of a surprise to you all. You're probably talking about the impacts of flooding in a lot of these meetings, but essentially a big driver is topography. So being here in the Mad River Valley, that's pretty clear that when it rains hard, all that rain eventually funnels its way down into our city centers that are often in the valleys and along rivers. So that just has an inherent vulnerability to it. We're also seeing increased precipitation. So Vermont's already a pretty wet state, but due to a warming climate, we're seeing an increase in both annual precipitation and also extreme precipitation events. And that's just because a warmer atmosphere can hold greater amounts of water, which then turn into rain or snow. And we're seeing changes in the way weather moves across the country as well. And so sometimes weather systems get stuck right over our state when maybe they would have been less likely to in the past. We also are going to be talking about historic river management practices that have in some cases made us more vulnerable to flooding. And so we're still kind of dealing with the consequences of those previous practices. And also our historic development patterns. So it makes sense that a lot of our development sits in the more flatter areas, the river valleys. Some towns in Vermont, were mill towns, so they had to be next to the river. But there is definitely some risk to that. So this is just a map that folks at the Department of Environmental Conservation, DEC, created that just, they said, what if we just circle all the areas that had the most damage from different flood events between 1973 and 2011. And what we see is that almost every year, it's like every year, every other year, we're seeing some kind of damaging flood event somewhere in the state, even though it might not get a lot of media attention. We're well aware of 2011, Hurricane Irene, 2023, and even 2024. But, it's good to acknowledge that this is affecting us somewhere in the state nearly every year. And even though it has localized impacts, sometimes it is quite destructive for those folks that live in that area. It's also good to kind of distinguish between different types of damage that we see from flooding. So on the one hand, we have damage from inundation, which is when the rivers rise above their banks, spill out onto the adjacent area, and submerge areas with water that that don't normally have water. So that photo of Montpelier in 2023 is pretty emblematic of inundation flooding. On the other hand, we have erosion flooding, which is pretty common again in our kind of like hilly mountainous communities. And that's basically when the river changes course, sometimes gradually, sometimes really rapidly, and completely charts a new course and takes out surrounding infrastructure. But what's really interesting is that over 75% of the monetary flooding damages are due to erosion in Vermont rather than inundation. And it's really because it's, you know, you're talking about the roads that you have to fix. It's really expensive to do that. So when things get damaged due to erosion, it's overall going to be much more expensive than maybe cleaning out a wet basement, even though that is also an issue that many people face. Shane, would you like to jump in here?
Sure. So some of you guys saw this. I don't know if that was, if you did see this, you may have seen some of these things.
I may have
Okay.
seen it.
All
I
right,
may have seen it.
we're gonna keep these somewhat limited.
Did you do something that involved like the sort of the primordial rivers and beavers and
I
that?
did,
I
but I
saw
don't
that.
know if it was that here in town. I don't. Yeah.
I've seen something you did on that was fascinating.
Vermont Woodlands Association member by chance? Is that-
Mm.
Okay, well, I have to figure this one out. This is a
Yeah.
puzzle. This is a
Yeah.
Have you
puzzle.
seen these slides?
That's not this one, all right.
No, I don't think I've seen it.
So, yeah, some of these are different, some of these might be.
Yeah.
So the point of this is like, you know, our response in Vermont, our response across the US, our response as humans across North America and around the globe. To deal with these hazards, right, these damages that we face by moving rivers. Has been largely a command and control approach. Right, dredge it to keep the water in the channel, straighten it to keep the channel out of the way of everything else, and armor it to keep the channel from moving. That's really been our approach. It hasn't worked that well, and we can,
Yeah, about it.
or, yeah, sure, which is
Advanced.
any, okay, thank you. So these are just some images to document or support that claim, and primarily around channel straightening, right? If the two channels on the left are what we typically expect to see, natural channels meander when they're in low gradient settings and broad valleys, they meander back and forth. If we go over to if we go down south to the White River along Route 100, if you've ever driven that stretch, you might have noticed that like the river's over there, then it goes straight across the valley, then it goes over there. That we suspect very strongly was all altered over the course of time to make way for the agricultural land use, right? Same thing over the mountain in my hometown of Huntington, along the Huntington River. Just straight as an arrow, makes a sharp bend one way, straight as an arrow. Always along the toe of the valley wall, not typically in the middle of the valley, because you're trying to get it out of the way. So you push it over against the valley wall. And in the Black Creek and Fairfield, the same thing, maybe, you know, more obvious. The rail bed is what runs across the middle there, so that cutoff loop there was to cut it off so that they didn't have to put culverts under the rail bed, just cut the river off and run the rail bed straight through. So you see this all across the state, right? We've straightened rivers everywhere along with the dredging and the honoring. Just a point, what are the implications of straightening? I don't think it's intuitive, but when we straighten the channel, we change the length of the channel, right? The curved path is gonna be longer, the straight path is shorter. You're dropping some elevation, so the shorter, straighter is gonna be steeper. That's what this plot shows. So it's just a hypothetical scenario where the natural channel shown by the dashed line, the slope of that channel shown in the plot below. And if you were to straighten that channel, you'd end up with a much steeper channel, right? Super important because stream power, and it's measured in watts, it's just the ability of the flowing water to do work, and you can measure that. It's what hydraulic engineers do, it's one of the things they do. Stream power is driven by two primary components. It's the slope of the channel and it's the depth of the water in that channel. Those two elements go into stream power, they're the primary variables. So when you strain a channel, you do a lot to change the power of the flowing water. So that's one of the reasons this hasn't worked, that our approach hasn't worked so well. The other has to do with the dredging and what the implications of dredging are. So That's actually, what's the brook? It comes in down by the cemetery, in Moortown or just over the
Freeman
line.
Brook.
Is it, which one?
I think Freeman Brook.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I took that years ago when I lived in Facein.
yeah, that one floods.
Yeah, it floods, right? Yeah, so here's the deal is that flooding's actually beneficial in some respects. Because when you have a channel with kind of low banks and you have floodplain on either side. That floodplain's really serving as your pressure relief valve, it's the blow off valve in the system, right? So all of that depth, I talked about depth as one of the main drivers of stream power. If you can govern the depth by spreading the water out. Right, so the water doesn't get deeper and deeper, you govern the stream power, and that's what systems naturally, that's what streams evolve to over time. You know, they naturally establish themselves. The form of the river is naturally such that there's a broad floodplain in these broader lower gradient settings, and that works as a pressure relief valve. Right, so when we go in. And that arrow is just to show the bank height is what we're keying in there. So let's just compare that arrow to the arrow in that channel. The idea here is that we went in and dredged that channel because we were tired of the road getting flooded. So, and this was like for long history, this has been the mentality, right? Not just here in Vermont, but globally. It's so intuitive, right? If the river's flooding and the water's going on the road, dredge the river a little bit and keep the water in the channel, right? It's no brainer. You create a very much deeper flow of water, that stream power increases, and that's what you get, right? Route 17 coming down the hill across from Old Mansfield Road where I used to live, like, saw that's what happened there. Not that we've dredged that recently, but that's the type of failure that you get. So dredging channels, straightening channels, armoring channels, burning channels just hasn't been effective, and that's just evidenced by the fact that we continue to pay more and more for, as Allison said, erosion damage. So what we effectively did was we had an inundation problem when we first settled the landscape. We dredged it, and all that really resulted in is the fact that we traded out we had an inundation problem. We traded out that inundation problem for the erosion problem. And the erosion problem is so much more expensive to recover from, right? So that gets this idea that we need to stop dredging and straightening our channels, and we need to figure out how to let those channels re-access those floodplains so that they can have that pressure relief valve. So that the Mad River, by the time it gets down to Moortown, isn't just ripping out every bank, right? So that's kind of the
We
idea.
appreciate that,
Yeah, we're here to please.
because we knew it was the valley people.
Yeah, I won't comment on that, Eric, I'm not gonna comment on that, but you can hold your
That's why we
opinion.
don't live in the valley.
You can,
It's like-
you can hold to your theories, yes, so this is just a little model this is a channel evolution model, it's just this conceptual. Graphical representation of how these rivers evolve, when they're impacted this way, there's a lot of different renditions of this model, this one's really simple, which is why I like to use it. So stage one, the river's stable, the channel's small, when the water, when we get that rain on snow event in the spring, the water gets up and it gets out of the channel, the pressure relief valve does its thing. The channel remains stable over time. In this scenario, the hypothetical is that someone builds a house along the channel, they get tired of getting flooded, they don't like that, so they put berms along the channel. And that gets you into stage two, so you're trapping all that water in the channel, it's the same thing as dredging, you're cutting off that pressure relief valve, all that pressure goes to work on the channel cuts downward, it's called the incision process. We see it everywhere throughout the state. Goes through this incision process, the banks get so high that eventually they start to collapse in, all that gravel comes into this channel, you're still widening. West branch of the Little River in Stowe is a great place to see this, these big bars building, really high banks. All that material comes in, eventually those bars stabilize, you get vegetation on them, they grow to a height where they're not getting flooded so frequently that they can't stabilize. And you get back to the stable condition in stage 5, which looks a lot like the condition in stage 1, except you've lost all that land mass and any surrounding investments. So that's just an idea, that's just a model of what we see a lot throughout Vermont. In fact, when I started working for the agency and we came across this in the scientific literature about a year into my position, my boss, who had worked as the head river management engineer for about 40, no, not 40, about 30 years at that point. He said, "Oh my God," he said, "I have seen this so many times, and I have put armor on those banks." And that's just caused the river to go down even more. And all these years, I wonder why the river kept cutting down more and more and more. And it was just, he was like, I was doing exactly the wrong thing. But see, that's where we are. Some time ago, starting in like 2004 with Governor Douglas's Clean and Clear initiative and a bunch of money that came to this A&R to this issue of river damage and flooding damage. The state started paying consultants. Well, we developed a protocol for doing assessments to understand the condition of our rivers. You know, were they in one of these stages of evolution? And what we found was that approximately 75% of the 5,000 river miles that we assessed were in stages 2, 3, or 4. 5,000 river miles, there's about 23,000 maps throughout the state, so 5,000 is about 20%-ish. I think it's fair that you can extrapolate out to say, yeah, maybe 75% of all the rivers in the state are in, you know, this unstable condition. That's one of the big reasons that we're so susceptible to flood damage, erosion damage when we get these big flow events. They're not connected to their floodplain. They don't have that pressure relief valve. So they're ripe for a lot of movement. Oh, there we are. Back in the Mad River Valley. Is that Butternut Hill Road just upstream or downstream? That's oh gosh. Well, here it is. Is this Yeshkamala right here, maybe?
Yeah.
Right,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
That's the Bundy.
Yeah,
Road, right?
yeah, that's gotta be long gone. I feel like they rebuilt that. This was after 98.
Oh, when we had that freshet thing that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
But
And
there's
it was
still,
all in Warren.
yeah,
Most part.
yeah, exactly.
there's still houses, I think, at least one house cantilevered over.
Is
the
there
river in Butternut.
still one
on
sitting
Butternut
there?
Road.
Yeah,
I thought so.
I think it just got affected by the flooding 3 or 4 weeks ago too,
Yeah,
that same area.
yeah,
They did.
yeah,
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 Yeah.
and the flooding before that,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So it's still very susceptible to flooding.
Yeah.
There's still, you know,
yeah. So this is our segue into the National Flood Insurance Program. I think this is our segue. Well, it is gonna be our segue. So Allison mentioned earlier, there's inundation damage and there's erosion damage. And I think everyone's probably heard of the National Flood Insurance Program because we all kind of deal with it at some level or not in municipal government. So the National Flood Insurance Program is designed to protect us against inundation hazard, really, right? Houses getting wet. So they map these areas that we know are gonna get wet, the floodplains. But they don't map these areas that are high and dry, but really susceptible to erosion hazards. That house is not in the mapped floodplain. The mapped floodplain shown in the yellow, by the yellow line, that structure's outside the yellow line. But it is within the state, so the state has come along and they've mapped the erosion hazard of the river corridor. And the house is in the river corridor for obvious reasons, right? So NFIP doesn't do anything to protect us from our most costly type of flood damage, right? So it just doesn't address erosion hazards. It just doesn't address them.
Going back to that, for whatever reason, I'm getting, you know, maybe just because it was the slide of Montpelier and then thinking about Barry. Those were inundation ones, and they seem like they should be the most expensive. But you're saying they're not because
Roads.
the waters go away and the roads are still like, the water eventually.
It's been over time, so, you know, maybe from one storm that hits one area and it's a lot of inundation, right? That if it's a lot of businesses and there's a lot of damage from that, certainly that's very expensive.
But the
But-
cost of mucking out a basement.
Yeah.
And repairing, you know, replacing drywall and your
Yeah.
flooring. Doesn't compare to the cost of rebuilding
A
Route one
bridge.
seven or replacing a bridge or culverts or that's the difference. That's the difference. And if you look at it across the state. the frequency, the extent of damage is also the erosion damage we see in more places. You know, we have recently had some pretty significant examples of inundation with these last floods because the Montpelier Bay area. But over the longer term, it's really the washed out roads and the blown out bridges and the houses that have fallen into the river and not been.
Which is a lot of what we saw in
Is-
2024.
Is what we saw,
Mhm.
yeah.
So it's not,
Right.
it's not
Around.
intuitive. I'm sorry, it's just like was kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We see water,
Yeah.
we see Waterbury, we see Moortown, we see
Yeah.
inundation.
Yeah,
And it looks terrible.
yeah, and
Yeah.
And it is terrible.
no, yeah, it is terrible, and it's like, it's life altering for those people that have to deal with it, right? It's very, like, it's devastating. It is, but it's just not as expensive. It's interesting, in 2011, right after Irene, I was stationed down in the southern half of the state to do assisting regulators down there on reconstructing the streams. And I'd go down there and it was just like a war zone. And I'd come back through Waitsfield and through Waterbury and I'd see all the inundation, but it just was like, you know, they had those massive mining dump trucks, just like, 10, 15 of them just constantly hauling up 107 along the White, and then you get down to the Braintree and like just complete absolute devastation. And yes, it was really bad here, and it was really bad in Waterbury, the inundation, but it's just just a different
Thank you for
type of
explaining.
yeah,
I didn't
so
quite get it.
I mean, just to support that, Shane, the flood damage we had last year. We lost 2 small bridges in town, and to replace those would be $2.5 million.
yeah,
Permanent replacement.
Yeah.
Just for 2 little bridges. I can't imagine if a big bridge was blowing out, all the road damage we saw over the last few storms.
Yeah.
It's
And even
expensive.
just culvert replacements are
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
more
too.
expensive than you would think.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, very expensive. Okay, so NFIP doesn't address erosion hazards, it just is not what it's designed to do, and there is no interest within FEMA to. A lot of different entities have been pushing that idea, but it's just not going anywhere, because they're broke, like really, they're.
We're gonna get rid of them anyway, right?
Yeah, we're gonna get rid of them, right, we're
They're
gonna
the
get rid of
problem.
them, right, they're going away, so.
Yeah.
I can't remember if we transition back, if you take over at some point, but maybe at the river
So
corridor
for-
slide,
for
okay.
one more, yeah.
All right, so we kind of switch off just so like, people get tired of talking, listening to me talk about this. So this is Vermont's participation in the National Flood Insurance Program has been pretty high. It's actually been really high. And so for quite a long time, we've looked at the participation rate before we really understood the erosion hazard issue. And we thought, well, we're doing everything we can. Right, we've got all of these towns enrolled in the flood insurance program. What more can we really do? And that's before we really started to look at the erosion hazard issue.
Back to that,
Yeah,
is that,
back to that.
yeah, is that? Towns can't opt out.
They can of the flood insurance
I didn't
program.
realize that.
Yeah, they don't have to participate. But that means nobody in the town is eligible for flood insurance.
What's the rationale on not participating?
Uh, I don't know. It is bureaucratic,
Yeah.
like, it's complicated. The administration burden is pretty high for
And I
municipalities.
think what Ned likes to say too is a lot of these communities, like it's up in the, there's a
Northeast
few in the
Kingdom.
Green Mountains, few in the Northeast Kingdom. Some communities might do a cost benefit analysis of like how many properties realistically are in the floodplain that are gonna be regulated versus how much administrative burden, and maybe it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
No, I'm looking
Yeah.
at this Northeast Kingdom, they're out of their
Yeah.
minds.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, Lindenville, yeah. So I don't know the details on why,
Right.
that we didn't, we don't know that.
I didn't know it was
So,
optional.
Our colleagues at the state would know that, the floodplain
Yeah.
management managers would know that, because they're constantly trying to get everybody to enroll, so.
Yeah.
So, I'm just gonna, okay, so do you wanna jump in here? Okay,
Yeah, so kind of where we've arrived at is we need a way to figure out where are those erosion hazards and map them out and figure out where should we basically not be putting future investments because we know that these are really hazardous areas. So that's where we've arrived at river corridors, which basically is the area on either side of the river where we expect the channel to adjust over time. You can think of it as kind of the wiggle room that the river needs to accommodate changes in energy, kind of return back to that more natural state that we saw on the diagram, and it needs to go through the process to get there. And so there will be changes to the river along the way. So that's what we define the river corridor as. And so what we can see from this map is that the river corridor and the mapped FEMA floodplains really work together to provide us the most comprehensive protection, because during big storm events, there is both inundation and erosion that we see happening. And so in some areas on the landscape, they overlap. In some areas they don't, particularly those areas kind of down at the bottom part of this image where the floodplain is much narrower than the river corridor. That's really showing an area where probably that river is disconnected from its floodplain. It's cut down deeper, and it actually just doesn't even have the ability to spill out. But we do know that those are areas where we're probably likely to see risk of erosion.
Those are areas, and this just jumped to mind.
Yeah.
I should put the image of that house, right? That's the image of the structure in Waitsfield,
Right.
right? It's not in the floodplain, but it's in the erosion hazard area.
Mhm. Yeah, so these maps are available for all of Vermont at the ANR Natural Resources Atlas. So if you are curious, you can go around and you can look. We won't be going into it at all today, but FEMA is doing flood map updates. So we will see some changes, but the river corridors have been mapped for the whole state with rivers that have watersheds greater than 2 square miles. So the small streams do not have river corridors, but most of our kind of named rivers do. And so now we compare to this map. So I think it was maybe around 2019, we had mapped river corridors for the whole state. But even before that, DEC was encouraging towns to adopt their own regulations around river corridors, essentially trying to prevent future investment from going in these areas because we know that the risk is so high. And so what we've seen is it's much more of a patchwork of adoption of these kind of regulations. So in yellow are the towns that have full river corridor protections, which are based off of kind of template language that comes from DEC model bylaws. Whereas the orange have some kind of meaningful exceedance of floodplain regulations that do in effect protect against erosion hazards. But you know, this is much more of a patchwork of communities that have these kinds of protections, and we know that, you know, flooding, it doesn't follow town boundaries, it doesn't follow county boundaries, so you are kind of reliant in some ways on what your upstream neighbors are doing. And so just because, you know, you might feel like you're doing everything you can do, if the town upstream from you doesn't have these kinds of protections, it does maybe put you at more risk as well.
Chuck, you'll notice
Yeah.
that basin's in the orange there, and there's quite a few beers with Kevin Rye at the hideaway that in conversation between Kevin and myself, I think that got us there.
Did that play into that?
That played into that?
Well, you know, that brings up a question
Yeah.
for me, and I don't know if now's the time to bring it up, but you know, when we talk about the floodplain, and I think we've had this conversation with Joshua at some point in time as well, that like the Mad River, you have a floodplain.
Broad
and
floodplain.
Places where the river can overflow
Yeah.
and cut down the flow and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. But when you get into Facein,
Yeah,
it's all steep rivers.
yeah,
There's really no floodplain,
That's
so
right.
it's coming down.
that's right.
And the erosion from the past couple of storms on
Yeah.
the hillsides of the Shepherd's Brook, as
Yeah.
an example,
Yeah.
is just tremendous.
So those are areas where you have pocket flood, you have small floodplains here or there, but you don't really have anything that's super meaningful.
Yeah, and
And
the elevation change.
and the
is-
ele, very steep, so a lot
Yeah.
of stream power, Shepherd's Brook is a great example. And that, and if you look at floodplain maps, FEMA hasn't bothered. And in fact, when we sometimes have a slide in here that shows the number of municipalities that have mapped floodplains, and in rural places like Vermont, where you don't have a large population and the cost benefit for the federal government to go through the effort of mapping floodplains throughout lowly populated, low population density areas, isn't there. They just don't map floodplains. So throughout a lot of Vermont towns, you don't have floodplains mapped. And certainly not on those smaller streams. So that's where these river corridors come into play more, is like the state has identified those erosional, those erosion hazard areas with the river corridor maps, with the floodplain maps, just don't do anything for you in those instances. So, yeah.
So that was a really long wind up to actually talk about the Flood Safety Act, but I think it does help to kind of understand kind of some of these river processes to get to this point. But essentially, 2023 was a real wake-up call for Vermont, especially in the legislature. And they passed the Flood Safety Act, otherwise known as Act 121. And it really aims to mitigate flooding in multiple ways. So we've been talking a lot about river corridors. And so that is a really major piece of this legislation because it gives DEC the authority to limit new development in river corridors statewide. There's also a part about dams to strengthen oversight and strategically remove derelict dams, as well as protect and restore wetlands to create a net gain in wetland acreage, because we know that wetlands are the area that act like sponges on the landscape and really help us to soak up extra storm flood water when we get these heavy rainstorms. So thinking about the river corridors timeline, because that's kind of part of this education and outreach, is to make folks like you all who do a lot of planning in your towns aware of kind of what's coming down the line, so there's no surprises and there's plenty of time to add public input, ask questions, because a lot of these details haven't actually been figured out yet. But essentially, the law itself does mandate a 2-year education outreach effort. So that's what Shane and I are kind of kicking off. We're hoping to get folks familiar with what is in the act, kind of the rationale behind what it is supposed to do. And then within the next year or so, DEC will probably have much more of a presence to kind of work through the details, continuing that outreach. But then something too that's important to mention is that there will be an update to the river corridor maps to identify areas in existing settlements that are within the river corridor where a new development will not increase erosion hazards. So, I was just in Montpelier last night. We're not changing the river right in that downtown area. It's kind of already been locked in place. Adding one more building right in downtown probably isn't going to add an erosional hazard. So Shane is actually doing a lot to kind of pilot that methodology process for mapping those areas where new development will be exempt from permitting in the river corridor within our kind of downtown river areas.
Yeah, if I could I add to
Mhm,
that? Just,
mhm.
so the designated centers, or in the statute, they're referred to as existing settlements, but designated centers, villages, downtowns. You all may be aware that was that part of the Act 250 legislation that mandates the new land use mapping to identify, and I think designated centers is the term of art in that legislation. So anywhere you have a designated center, we're trying to accommodate that many of our villages and downtowns or economic development areas are along rivers. And we want to allow for continued development, dense development, economic, the economic engines of our villages and towns to continue to grow in those areas. So it's kind of a recognition that, look, we have to allow development along rivers in some locations. we're gonna try to limit that to where it's really not gonna increase the hazards significantly. And then by regulating and limiting development outside of those designated centers, we're creating those areas that the river can really adjust to achieve that lower slope and stream power and store water on the floodplains. So that's the infill mapping that Allison's talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, so it's also referred to as infill mapping.
Infill
if
mapping
you
is
see
the
that anywhere.
term in this.
And then the last couple of things is there'll be a report to the legislature summarizing public input, so part of the process right now. And then finally, it's going into mid 2027 and then early 2028 is really when the new rules kind of go into effect, and then administration of those rules begins in 2028. So it's kind of a long run-up period. There's a rulemaking process that kind of, if it's ongoing or will begin soon, to kind of work out a lot of those details about permitting, things like that. And so this is coming down the road, but we're still a couple years away. And that's where we do want to know what your questions are. We're happy to take comments. There's also a formal way to do it, so I don't know if the slides maybe can be sent out afterwards to folks,
Definitely.
and so you can go in later on, and it's like 3 questions, just asking for your questions, comments, concerns.
So the legislature wants to know what, like, they wanted to make sure that the public input was really robust. So they, mandated this 2-year outreach and education period to really get feedback. Allison and I don't have it really detailed out in that timeline we had up there, but DEC isn't quite ready to engage in the outreach and education right now. I mean, they're still adding staff, they're still dealing with the 23 and 24 floods, they're like still really swamped. So we stepped in, our organization stepped in and said, look, we pushed for this legislation, we recognize the burden that it places on DEC and the agency. Can we work with you and get out and start doing some level of outreach and education? We know we don't know anything about what the permitting program is going to look like. That's not going to be known until you go through the rulemaking process, but we can at least get out ahead and start laying the groundwork and just let people know this is coming and that they should expect us and DEC to be knocking on their door, try and get on an agenda again to bring more, once we start to know what the permitting program looks like a little bit more, we'll be back to let everybody know what we know. And the idea is that everyone then is really well informed and ready to submit comments during that public rulemaking process. So it's really a good, robust public comment process in the rulemaking process.
Can I ask one question? So Warren has, you probably know, or may not know, I don't know, has a timber
Bridge, the
timber
dam.
crib dam.
Yeah.
And I think DEC has said several years ago, there was a movement to preserve it as a historical structure, and I think DEC said, forget that, you're not restoring that dam. So it's sort of although I'm by no means an expert in it, I believe it's just in a state of deterioration until it collapses. And I saw you did, one of your bullet points up there was about bridge removal,
Dam removal.
Dam.
Yeah.
not bridge, dam
Yeah.
removal, and it just sort of struck a chord, maybe there's.
So there is a component, and I don't know, you may know the details on the dam removal. I don't know them that
Yeah.
well.
I think we don't really know the details outside of what the act itself says. I think that is part of what we're planning to do is reach out to wetlands program and dam safety, so that when we're doing these presentations, we do have more to tell you, but they might not actually have much more details than what the act itself has yet. I know that there's some changes in how dams are overseen, to try to consolidate that somewhat more and do an inventory too of dams that are and which is what they already do, but I think strengthen the inventory of dams that are at risk, pose a risk
Yeah.
to.
Cause I
the failure, yeah.
don't know the details, I just think, I didn't get the sense there was state support
Mhm.
for Warren to deal with the dam.
Mhm.
There was,
If Warren said we allow for this dam to be removed, there are a number of organizations that would be in there probably before you went to bed tonight, like.
Oh, really?
Saying that we're here to help you remove this dam.
Oh.
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Okay, so maybe it's
yeah.
just something I'm gonna talk about at the
It's-
planning commission.
Warren has,
Friends of the Mad River might be interested.
yeah,
Something.
yeah, so. There
So
have
you
long
think
been
there's
efforts,
been,
there have been
there's
efforts
just
to
been-
try to remove the
Yeah.
dam in the past, there's been very strong resistance to remove that dam.
yeah, I knew there was when there was this group that was like, you
Yeah.
gotta preserve this
Yeah,
historically important.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine the right answer is just let it
Yeah,
deteriorate and
I-
all this.
I
timber
actually
go down.
mentioned it to somebody the other day, they said, when's that dam coming? And I said, probably when it falls down.
All right, we'll talk about, I'll see if there's any will.
Based upon the sentiment within the town of Warren in the past, that's.
All right, well, that's enough chat
Yeah.
about it. Does anyone else have any other questions?
So if I'm understanding where we're at with all this now in Act 121, we haven't talked about a lot of details. So essentially what you're here to tell us is we get a problem. There's gonna be some regulation coming out of the legislature to address the problem.
Yeah.
And we're just preparing you
Yeah.
for something's coming down the road.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant piece of land
Yeah,
use
yeah.
regulation.
But we don't have details on that right now as to what that will look like.
I mean, we know where the river corridors are. You can look at a map. You can look at the ANR Natural Resources Atlas online, which is their map viewer. It's where they put all of their data, like things like, where the wetlands, the river corridors are, and there you can see where they are. You can
Yeah.
see where floodplains are. But what we do know is that, as Allison mentioned, going back to like 2010, 11, 12. The Agency of Natural Resources Floodplain Management Program has been offering towns model language that they could adopt. That would add the protection of river corridors to their floodplain protections. And that. After the 23 flood event and then actually after the 24 flood event. The legislature finally said, you know what? The Agency of Natural Resources has to take this over and we have to have river corridor protection statewide.
Mhm.
Because we're not getting adoption by the towns and we're just experiencing greater and greater flood damages. And. By January 1 of 2028, that permitting program will be there, so if someone proposes a development in the river corridor, they'll have to get a permit from the agency.
Mhm.
That's the bare bones of what we know, I guess.
So it is gonna be an agency permitting project?
It'll be
process?
an agency, it's floodplain management program out of the rivers program. Yeah, and they already manage river corridors, like on agricultural settings, right, where municipalities can't regulate, so they already regulate. Through the Act 250 process, and then state-owned structures, they already regulate development in river corridors around state-owned structures.
And I know that there's the consideration for the infill mapping and that will exempt certain regions from that
Yeah,
permitting process. Is that? I know it's probably not known yet, but
yeah,
has there been thought that of given to connecting that infill mapping exemption to also the tier selection process?
what's the tier
Which-
selection?
So,
The-
which is to say like,
Act 181.
yeah, which is where like you can, towns and really like more dense centers can opt into basically getting themselves out of Act 250 review by the state and taking that on internally.
Oh, okay,
I don't know if there's a similar thing for this where like municipalities are able to assert that.
so one thing that we
Control.
didn't say is that municipalities will have the option to continue to regulate river corridors. Themselves,
Oh, okay.
they will have the option to do
Okay,
that,
so there's a
sorry,
similar-
probably mentioned that.
Okay.
And river corridors does play into those tier 1A, 1B.
Yeah,
Is that part of the
designations,
land
which-
use mapping?
It's the new land
process?
use mapping,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, which I have to say I don't really understand at
It's-
the
Oh,
moment.
so.
There was kind of this, I don't know if it was an oversight, I don't know if I should characterize it as an oversight, but there's this chicken and egg situation that we're in where the river corridor legislation refers to the designated centers.
Right.
But the designated centers haven't been established yet.
Yeah.
So we've been working in a process with a number of organizations, to go through a process of exploring different methods for doing the infill mapping. like, what's the methodology for identifying these areas?
Okay.
And at the beginning of it, I was like, okay, we don't have the designated centers, so we have to like, we have to kind of like assume where those will be.
Right,
So there is that kind of, and it had, like, we did make the statement as a coalition of organizations that it would be nice if that whole process of that land use included the river corridors and that infill mapping, the process kind of took place in that process. That would be the more holistic way to do it, but I
That's
think
a
it
lot
was
of
just
coordination.
the coordination of the timing of the passage of the legislation. So what's gonna happen and what has happened, we came up with recommendations for a process. There was like 20 different organizations involved in kind of the stakeholder-driven process about how would you map these infill areas. We hired a consultant to help us through that process. We came up with a process that everyone was happy with. And we handed that to DEC, or we're gonna hand that to DEC and say, this is one way to do this. There's a stakeholder group that supports this. Everybody from V-Trans to conservation organizations to the League of Cities and Towns and Housing and Commerce and Community Development. Here's a way that you could start, take this and through your rulemaking process, you can adopt this outright, or you can start with it and, develop the way, modify it as you see best fit, but. So we gave them something to start with, a sort of a stakeholder group coalition. So, yeah,
Well, thank you both.
yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
very good.
Thank you for taking the time to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and certainly like if we'll be offering to come back, but if that there are people in town that would be concerned or want to have input, that's what the legislature's really, they're expecting us to bring them input back and so that, yeah, this works out as well as it can for everybody.
I'll be sure, I'm sorry, we had some like last minute folks that couldn't make it, so I'll,
Yeah.
whatever you wanna send over to me or Josh,
Send
we
you
can make
like
sure
a
we
PDF
share
of the
everything.
thing.
Yeah.
And then I'll send the video out to folks that wanna see the whole or conversation as well.
And it makes sense to me that maybe the MRVPD would be sort of could be like a clearinghouse for,
That would be great.
Yeah.
town.
Yeah.
for town Comments.
Just a thought to the fact, I mean, when I look at something like this.
Yeah.
I see a huge public relations problem.
Yeah,
And that, I've been dealing with this stuff for years too.
yeah,
And, everyone's like, well, literally, within the last month, I talked to somebody like, well, we need to be dredging the river.
Yeah.
And it's like,
yeah,
it's like prominent people too.
yeah,
And like,
Yeah,
it's really
yeah.
hard. And then,
Yeah.
and I understand the inundation, I was really interested in data about what's most expensive.
yeah,
Yeah,
But, Montpelier's like the poster child for flooding.
yeah,
And those are the pictures that you always see. Those are the ones that are in the news.
yeah,
And, why do we keep moving? But, we should just be pulling out of Montpelier,
Yeah.
and it's like,
Mhm.
yeah,
this is stupid. How many times are we gonna invest in this?
yeah,
And it goes back to the, what you said about the LOT. It was a PR problem. And I just hope that someone from the state, it's not, and please don't say this.
no,
It's
no,
not you
this is
eggheads.
what we want, this is
You
what
know,
we want right
It's
here.
not
This is
you
what we want.
eggheads
Yeah,
that are
that's what-
telling us what we should do.
Yeah,
And then I look at, that map, that's why I was asking,
Yeah.
the national, the NFIP. And if you overlay that out, NFIP map, town map with who's, who has regulation.
Mhm.
So not only don't they have regulation, they're not, they're the ones that are gonna be most at risk. And I think that overlaying those maps are really, really important. But I think there's gotta be some thought to how this is rolled out from a PR perspective. And I'm a marketing guy, like.
yeah, right, so that's what you
But
think about.
I've seen so many things happen, like the LOT, where there was just, they didn't listen. The eggheads didn't listen,
Yeah,
and you gotta deal with that.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
um,
So I've got I don't know if this is what you're thinking about, but over in Huntington, we had, and we're out of time, just like.
I do think we are. at the
Okay,
end of our-
okay, okay.
yeah, I'm sorry to bring this up, but
Yeah, no, it's a
Really
good
appreciate it.
comment.
Yeah.
It's a good comment, and yeah, I'd love to hear more.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you guys know each other, obviously.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we do have a
Yeah,
bunch of other
yeah,
stuff
yeah.
up on the
Yes,
agenda.
yes.
and
Sorry.
Is that okay, everybody?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
thank you both.
Yeah,
Very,
absolutely, yeah,
Eric@meadowrivervalley.com, send me an email.
okay,
You can remember that.
okay,
Eric with a C.
I might be able to.
I think if you're, the planning district has a website with the steering committee members.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can find it
Yeah,
there.
so if I can't remember.
And we'd love to have you come back as things become clear.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and we do,
definitely.
and I did one at the theater, it was all about dredging and why dredging doesn't work. We went into more of that detail side of it, because that's what we're up against. It's like,
It's nice seeing you.
just put the equipment in the river and dredge it out and straighten it, put the rock back on the bank and everything's fine. What's the problem, right? That's,
Nice to meet you.
yeah.
Yeah,
So-
Thank you
yeah,
very
thanks,
much.
everybody.
Thank
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Okay, that brings us to item 6B on our agenda, B app introduction and discussion.
Yeah, so, Cora here has joined the meeting. We have Eric over yonder, Jonathan, Chuck, and Dan. These are all members of the Meadow Valley Planning District Steering Committee. And I don't want to take too much of your time, but just to provide a little bit of context. Cora, Josh, and I all met, early May. We were invited to this, summit called, it was the Common Ground Summit. And it was put on by the nonprofit that Cora works for, which is called Shock. And the summit collected a bunch of community development oriented organizations and individuals to discuss this project that Shock is working on. And Shock essentially is a nonprofit that is funded, kind of tech for good is the mission. So creating technology and tools that can be used for good and just kind of creating a positive influence in the world. So the thing that we're going to discuss is the first project that Shock has been working on, which is this app called B. Cora, feel free to correct me if I misspoke at all. And I wish Josh were here tonight, just because he's been involved in this process a lot. I know him and Cora have had a lot of conversations as well, but Cora is the expert on all this. And I know also has had conversations with Eric and a couple other community members over the last month or so to talk about the idea.
Good to see you again, Cora.
Hi, nice to see you, Eric. Nice to see you, Sam. Nice to meet everybody. Yeah, I'm Cora. I'm zooming in from Putney. So it's just like a little too far for me to make the drive home and, stay awake and start my day on time in the morning. So yeah, no, you nailed it, Sam. I do have a slide deck. I'm gonna be perfectly honest. I really hate presenting slide decks and talking, and I think what I'm going to do is just sort of jump to the really key slides, because I think a lot of what B does and what's exciting about it is actually really intuitive for people who work in the planning space or just generally in the community development or like civic health space, because it's really sort of talking about a lot of problems or challenges that are really front of mind, and presenting sort of a novel solution to those challenges. So I'm going to just share. Can I share my screen? Yeah.
You should be able to.
I
I can give you permission if need be.
Yeah, I think so. It's saying everything's unknown with big scary exclamation marks next to it.
Okay. Okay, interesting. So at the bottom bar, do you see a share button, or is it not there?
Yeah, no, it's there. Are you just seeing a big?
I should have it set so multiple participants can share, but I'm not
Oh.
sure.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, it's on my end.
Okay.
Oh, this is gonna be annoying. Hang on one second. Sorry. Let's see if it'll do it. Sorry, I finally retired my 11-year-old laptop and am realizing that I don't have all the right settings. Okay, there we go. Now it worked. Okay, cool. All right. There you go.
Sweet.
Okay, that seems like it's working. So don't worry, I'm not going to read these slides to you. I'm just sort of reusing a deck that we've used for other things. But so B was founded by this guy, Saul Costa, who grew up in Vermont, got a computer science degree, moved out to California, and built and sold a tech company in his words, for a life-changing amount of money. And he decided that he wanted to sort of put those resources towards building tech for good. Essentially, he sort of realized that a lot of the problems that we're dealing with in the world today were sort of born of technology and technology going awry, and had this idea to sort of start fighting fire with fire, and creating a nonprofit to build tech for good. So that's Shock, which is the parent nonprofit tech startup that I work for. And the main sort of thread, we've only developed one application so far, but the sort of central tenets are like tech that is non-extractive. It doesn't try and keep you on app for as long as possible. It actually gets you off your phone and into your community. Tech that's really secure, like very, very data secure, and tech that's really about community building and community development. So Bee is the name of this first app, and essentially it matches community members with one-time volunteer opportunities within their communities. So if I were we were using these terms, we'll see, this is the working term for somebody who would do an activity on the app is the doer, and then the host is the person hosting that activity. So if I got onto the app, I would see a map. Presumably I would give it, location permissions. And if I'm a doer looking for some activity to do in my community, I see these little icons, which suggest sort of different categories of activity. I click on that. I have all of this information, and I can sign up for that activity right in the app and then import it into my calendar. And the reason that we sort of landed, first of all, on this volunteerism theme, and secondly on this format, was that we early on the team did some research. They did some like sort of on the street interviews with different people. They sent out some surveys and found that really people want to be engaged in their communities. They really want to be engaged with organizations doing volunteer work, but it's hard to fit into their lives. There isn't sort of an easy way to be aware of what's going on. And also, I don't know, personally, I'm on 2 committees and that is my committee quota. I cannot be on any more committees. I've got kids, I'm building a house. Like I've already done the thing where I burn out because I'm involved in too many boards and volunteer efforts. But that doesn't mean that I don't want to, give back to the trail system that I use weekly with my kids, right? Like I would love to do a trail cleanup. I just don't want to join the trail listserv and get those emails and sort of be involved in a more ongoing basis necessarily. So understanding that like really civic health is like a sort of desire across the board in communities across the country, but there's sort of a gap between that desire and the ability to engage in ways that sort of work with their busy lives, essentially. So that was really what we were going for when we came up with this concept. So the idea is that if I'm somebody looking to do something in my community, I can hop on the app, I can find opportunities, I can find volunteer opportunities. And we've sort of expanded that concept a little bit because there are so many, there's so many activities in Vermont towns that are really about bringing the community together, the entire community. They're not, pay to play. They're not exclusive. They're really for everybody. So we decided that those actually also really have a place on the Bee app. So Bee is really for those sort of one-off volunteer opportunities, whether those are coming from an organization or an individual or a municipality or whatever other entity. And they're also for community events that are nonpartisan. They can, you could do like a get out the vote event, but it wouldn't be sort of a candidate specific event that are available to everybody. So again, they're not paid events and activities and are really about bringing the community together. So that's a concept. These are just some different examples. So you could have something that's sort of like a repeat thing, that's, Bennington Community Garden example. You could have something that is maybe sort of a last minute event that, for instance, I always use the example, let's say I hiked Putney Mountain and I noticed that there were beer bottles all over the trailhead. I could say, hey, I'm Cora, not affiliated with a community organization. And I was hiking Putney Mountain. There's beer bottles all over. So I'm going to do a Putney Mountain trailhead cleanup from 2 to 4 on Saturday. Yes, it's family friendly. Yes, bring a friend. We've got room for lots of people. It could be for community events. Farmers market is the example here. or I don't know what Goodwill Opportunities means, but a clothing drive, something like that. So again, that's probably something that's going to be organized by an organization within the community. I think, using Putney as an example, because that's where it's my community. There are, of course, lots of opportunities for like our town committees, like the Conservation Commission, or we have like a Wetlands Commission, right? They have a high need for just bodies to be out, pulling knotweed or, I don't know, doing all of these, sort of engaging in all of these different pieces of the town that are really sort of essential to the civic health of the town, but it can be really challenging to find the people to do that work. So that's just sort of an example of what these different activities look like. So again, it's simple. That's the other key thing, is that the app is not a forum. So people often ask us how it differs from Front Porch Forum. Like structurally, Front Porch Forum is a for-profit business and we're a nonprofit. So that's just sort of like a structural difference. But also the idea is that you don't have to spend a lot of time on this app. You get on, you search by your town, or you zoom in, zoom out on the map. Maybe you're going to filter by category. Maybe you're going to filter by day of the week. And then you find the activity that you want to do, you sign up, you import it into your calendar. And the only reason that you would have sort of another need to interact with the host of that activity or the app is if for some reason that activity is canceled, the date has changed, the location has changed, etc. That's me holding a lamb. But this is just more sort of about like why we landed on this idea of like a mismatch between the systems that we use to try and coordinate volunteers and sort of the realities of our lives in 2025. Emails are great. I think they're really important and there's a place for them, but I certainly miss a lot because I have so much flooding my inbox. Also this idea of like having a chance to sort of try something out, see if you're interested in it, and choose to engage on a longer term basis if you want to, but also to have sort of the flexibility to say, okay, well, this is great. I did a trail cleanup this day. Next week, yeah, I'm going to go, mend clothings for this donation to the refugee resettlement program in Brattleboro. And that's what I'm going to try that week. And also this sort of, I don't know, epidemic of loneliness. It has been coined, but just generally the post-COVID, sort of more insular way we lead our lives is, something that people are talking about. It's a challenge, and revitalizing the sort of in-person experience of community has been a process post-COVID. And we see this as a real opportunity to sort of, I don't know, inject that with some different energy. Definitely for people who are new Vermonters, I think it's really exciting. Like I was talking to this guy, James, who works in the Upper Valley, and he does a lot of work with their Welcome Wagon program. And for him, this is like such a great addition to that because it's a way for people to find things to engage in that aren't just, meeting at a bar and hopefully the neighbors that are invited show up. It's like really connecting around this sort of shared value of the community. Yeah, so I have a lot of ideas and energy and theories about how this is going to impact communities in Vermont. I get very jazzed up about it, a little less so at 8:30. I'm a little slower at this time of night, but I'm going to sort of pause there. And I guess like some other sort of just important details are that the app is free and will remain so. We're sort of right now, we are focusing on donations and sponsorship from like private foundations, like family foundations, sort of private grants, because Saul, having sort of lived in California and been a part of that tech scene, has access to a lot of these funds that are available that aren't necessarily easily accessible were you not sort of in that world. And we're also really fortunate that Saul right now, because of this, company that he built and sold, is able to fund this in a pretty robust way. So the plan for B is that it will always be free. There might someday be some sort of a Patreon program where it's like pay what you can, or we also have what we're calling the Vermont Bee Fund, and that's probably going to expand as well. But right now, it's essentially a micro grant program. So if you're somebody who wants to host an activity on bee and there's a, I don't know, ditch digging activity or something, and you need to buy 10 shovels, you can access up to $500 a year per year per host to get whatever tools you need to complete the activity. Or if you want to have a pizza party after your trash pickup, whatever. So, so that fund is going to be something that we will fundraise for. So money will go into that fund, and ideally that'll sort of just recycle, and we'll gather donations for that. But again, the app itself is not a paid app. So yeah, so I'm hoping to work in communities. I've sort of identified these 7 pilot communities in the southern 2/3 of the state where you know, there was an individual or group of people who seemed really excited about this. And so I'm working with those communities to figure out how Bee can be the most helpful. We also, the app is live on the App Store and Google Play, but it's definitely more of a beta version. We're sort of transitioning some things to really make the app as robust as we want it to be. But we're also sort of hoping to gather feedback from these pilot communities before we do a wider, you know, statewide push. I mean, it's available, but we aren't really pushing it as intensely as we will be, you know, to hear feedback and make sure from a functionality perspective, but also just from like, is this doing what we want it to do for you? Is it working the way we expect it to? And really getting feedback from folks on the ground in these communities. So now I really will stop talking, and yeah, that's what we're working on.
Does anyone have any questions for Cora?
I don't have any questions, but Cora, I was just gonna mention some of the discussions we've already had to give you a
Please.
sense of, you know, they really want to create, you know, have Mad River Valley be one of the pilot communities. And it was interesting when I met with Cora initially and Sam and Sam and Josh. Was that this week?
Last week?
Last week. Yeah, and so you were on vacation. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And kind of serendipitously, I had a community member reach out to me about the idea of doing a volunteer job fair. And I thought it was a good idea. They'd had one recently in Waterbury. And then, you know, with in my world where I'm dealing with, you know, with the Stewart MRV program, which is a volunteer organization that's very successful with its volunteers. You know, we've worked closely between that and the Trails Collaborative with the Friends of the Mad River, Mad River Path, Mad River Riders, trying to think who else I'm missing, the Rec District. You know, we have this existing relationship, and then layered on top of that, we have our community calendar, which is very, very successful. And it was very robust, and people have gotten very used to putting all their meetings and things on there, and events and whatnot. I spoke to my web guide yesterday, and adding a place where you can say, is this and when you submit an event, one of the new things that we can put on there is this is a volunteer driven thing, and we're looking, you know, so that it would automatically upload to Bee. So we have this existing relationship, and we've also started developing a full list of all of the organizations that utilize volunteers. I had a meeting just on Wednesday with Wednesday with the folks in the food bank at the community pantry, and they were really excited about it. So we have these existing relationships and the events. So I think that we're going to be able to get that a lot of stuff up quickly, so we can really show, because I think the problem with when you look at this app, there's not a lot there. And when we're gonna have in our area, you know, that number is, you know, you'll see like a number, it'll say 18, and there's 18 different volunteer opportunities. And I think we can do that very, very quickly, and really be a leader in this. And my biggest question about it, and I asked Cora this when we met, I said, yeah, but you know, a lot of my volunteers are older, they're not gonna use an app, and I hate apps, and like, I'm reluctant to add another app to my phone. Sam doesn't even have a phone that takes apps. And, you know, Cora's response was really good, and it was very thought-provoking for me in that he was like, yeah, that's great, and you're doing okay with these older people, but you're not engaging these younger people. And so that really struck a chord with me, and I really like the idea of it. I talked to the folks at the Mad River Riders, which is a very young group of people, and they thought it was a great idea. You know, we're doing a pop-up, Stewart MRV pop-up at the Pines Rest area tomorrow, I think. And, you know, that would be like so easy to do, and someone would just show up for 2 hours. And so we're gonna be working with Cora to initially to get going with this job fair. We're gonna do a job fair in September 20th, I think is the date that we've selected. And we're gonna try to do it with a movie screening of a film called Join or Die. And you know about that, right? Cora,
Me?
that film?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know about the film. I'm gonna have to preview it ahead of time, but just based on
it's on Netflix.
the email. Okay.
You can see it there, and it's really
Awesome.
quite good, and it's really, really interesting. Guy from Kennedy School, you know, Harvard
Yep.
School of Government, and do a screening, having a place where you know, we can have a volunteer job fair. And we've had one also, just so you're aware, on Green Up Day, we did this with our kind of existing groups at on Green Up Day at the Welcome Center, the Chamber Welcome Center. So we have some experience with it. It's been successful. Has been successful already for us. And with this and their support is going to be great. And we're hoping to get their Bees help with marketing it, promoting it, getting the app out there. Yeah, and building community. I mean, you were talking about this with, you know, the big picture, and you know, we need these opportunities, and I think this is a great way to engage a lot more people. So I'm really excited about it. When you saw the email stream just today about
Yeah.
all, we're getting really excited about it. So we got
Yeah.
some good stuff going on.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's really exciting. And I think that I really love the approach, not just because it was my approach, but I am finding that I do really love the approach of like working within these existing community units. Because initially, as you know, we were just really excited about this, and we were connecting with like, you know, nonprofits all over the state, and we were making all these connections, and it just wasn't gelling. And I sort of paused to reflect on why it just wasn't gelling. And you know, as a Vermonter and as somebody who is I rely on my community. I am so ingrained in my community. I realize that if we're creating this like app that is essentially amplifying what's happening in these place-based communities, that's how we really need to approach it. And so, you know, I had this email thread today, right? Everybody's on that, you know, chain about the volunteer fair, super excited about that. Then I went down to the Putney Library, and I'm connecting with them because I'm also launching it in Putney. And there's a lot of energy around it. Like, it's really, I think there's a huge opportunity, and I'm really excited to sort of see, I don't know, to like learn how communities are going to want to use it, and to really see it with that density within one community, like density of doers, density of activities that are up there, and really, yeah, just test all my theories. So, yeah.
And Eric, I'm pleased to hear that you see the utility. I really am pleased. I mean, it's kind of I'm not the target audience. I have a.
Oh, yeah, you are.
Well.
Pick up a damn shovel, Dan.
Someone would have to show me how to use a shovel.
Yes.
But I've had a thesis, or sort of this truism, or this: young people are too busy to volunteer. So I think this will be a great, the great way to prove, no, that's not the problem, or that's not the entire story. Yes, they're very busy, but there are ways. So, this will be, I'm more excited now than I was, because all you have to do is say a new app, and I'm of the age where that's,
But everybody has that response. Like, I have that response. Like,
But anyway, I do I do, that you're excited, and I know you manage volunteers, and I don't manage volunteers. You know, that excites me to hear Eric say that he sees a real benefit. So, and then maybe, yes, someone can show me how to use a shovel in the future, or cut down a knotweed. Yeah,
Yep.
I ran
I have
into,
soft lawyer hands, so they'll have to give me.
We
Well,
know.
yeah,
I ran into Peter Colgan,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
the other day, and, you know, from the Rotary, and he's got some thoughts as to.
Oh, he's on our email, he's on our chain.
Perfect.
Yeah, we've
perfect.
already, he's one of the ones
He's looped
that's
in.
on that chain,
He
so
was
yeah,
explaining to me some of the stuff that he was thinking about, so
Yeah.
as long as
Oh.
you're looped in.
we are all talking to him
Yeah.
every day.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
any other
Yeah.
questions for Cora?
No,
And
good
Corey,
presentation, thank you.
Thank you.
I saw your
Thank
email
you.
asking about Josh, if he's still doing that event. He's a little under the plains cleanup.
Yeah.
Smart, right?
Yeah, so Josh is a little bit under the weather, so it sounds like it's still happening. but
Yeah, it's
he
still
might not be
happening.
There.
Okay.
You coming up?
Saul's coming down from Hyde Park.
Oh, he's coming tomorrow.
Yeah, I think so. Let me double check
Oh.
that.
Oh, great, I'll make a point of being there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm gonna just like make sure, but yeah, he is. Last I knew, he was fully planning on coming down.
oh, that's awesome.
Cool.
The one other thing that I want to say, oh no, I did say this, right? That individuals, it doesn't have to be organization, but like related to an organization. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm super excited about that also because I think that it's going to be like, you know, it's so easy to get stuck in this cycle of planning and trying to reach consensus and discussing and arguing over semantics. And sometimes like for some of the things that you know, you got to go through that process. For some of the things, it's like, no, we can just like plant pansies in the planters down Main Street. I mean, you know, that's the one thing I'm a little nervous about is like, you got to figure out, you ask the right people before you just move forward with something like that. But there are so many things that like you can just do. And so you know, I'm excited to see if people take advantage of that in a positive way. Yeah.
So what is this Pines?
The Pines Restaurant is on Tremblay Road.
Uh-huh.
You know, where it's a state-owned piece of property that has been really neglected over the years. It became one of our Stewart MRV sites, one of the 28 sites.
Where,
Josh was-
where on Tremblay Road is
It's
it?
right on the corner.
Right, yeah.
Of what?
100.
Yeah.
That little pull, that little
Yeah.
pull-in area?
Yep. And it's a lot, it's really very well known for, that's where a lot of people like shoot heroin. Seriously,
They're taking a nap and I never saw anyone.
yeah, most of the people also take their nap.
Okay. Everyone else was nodding off, so I know.
Right.
Se-
it seemed
sequence
like
of
you fit
events.
right in. But you know, Josh was the site steward for that and the state stopped, you know, DOT has a lot of other priorities and they stopped mowing it. And Josh was like bringing his mower down there and it's a pretty big site that gets a lot of use. And, you know, the Stewart MRV program has been so successful that one of the big problems that we're running into, or probably our biggest problem, is that our site stewards don't feel like they have anything to do because the places are so clean because they've done such a good job that the ethos has changed, so people don't litter anymore.
Right.
Or very little, and they're like looking for cigarette butts and tiny little things, which is awesome, but they feel like I'm out there doing nothing. So Tom came up with the idea of doing these pop-ups. And so he invites all of the stewards and we did one at the Trap Eye in Warren. We did one at Warren Falls was amazing. And they were so thrilled about it because the Forest Service was so thrilled about it because of their budget cuts. They don't have the funds to maintain it as well as they should. They only have someone come in once a week. It used to be 3 times a week. And, you know, when we were doing it 3 times a week, there was someone, either Stewart MRV or Forest Service there 6 days a week, which is amazing, but that, you know, how the traffic gets there. And they just, like 8 or 10 people showed up and Tom showed up with all of the, you know, tools and everything. And they weed whacked and they cleaned up and they, you know, then the Forest Service is thrilled. And our, you know, and in 2 hours, 10 people can do a lot. And, you know, and they were just so happy to see this transformation of this overgrown place. And in 2 hours, it was like immediate gratification. And people were really psyched about it. That's when he did the other one at the Travel Eye. And that one also got another, and last year we did one on Bridge Street, which was amazing. And then we got the Hardwood kids involved in that. And now we're doing this one at Pines because that's just too much for Joshua to bring his mower down there, you know, in the back of his Volvo to mow it. It takes him a couple hours to do that. And if we can get, you know, 8 or 10 people to do it, you know, we can do that. And this is the sort of thing B would be ideal for this, that we can do something. And young people are longing for things to do. They want community. You know, you talked about, we gotta do that with the big picture, like. People wanna do stuff, they just don't know what to
Yeah,
do,
no,
they
I
don't wanna
agree.
get involved in like, oh, they think, oh god, the Rotary, it's a bunch of old people, you know,
Well,
like.
the planning commission, a bunch of blah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
no, I get it. And I do agree with, wholeheartedly agree that we feel very atomized and alienated, and the bonds of community are sadly,
Yep.
you know, strained post-COVID, so, okay. Any other questions for Cora?
No,
No?
no,
Thank you so much, Cora.
appreciate it.
You are so welcome. I just have
Is-
to, oh, no, what?
Did you check, is he coming tomorrow?
Oh.
Is Saul coming tomorrow?
Oh, Saul. Sorry, I can't see I can't tell who you're talking to because it's not me. I'll confirm, but he's planning on it, and I'll just shoot you an email to confirm. But
Thank you.
he's definitely planning. The last I knew, he was definitely planning on it, so I'm sure he'll still be
Awesome.
there. He just wanted me to confirm that it was still happening. And I'm going to say one more thing because I just had an idea while you were talking of another great thing about P, which is just that, like, you know, as you were talking about Stewart MRV, I was thinking about that, of course, again, in the context of my own community and my own town. And like, I really hope there's a phenomenon of copycatting that happens where one community sees what another community is doing and decides to try it out and reaches out to them. And I was just talking to this amazing guy. We were up at Intervale. They do this like free summer festival, Summervale. And I was talking to this guy. I can't, Stewart was his name. He works for the bike nonprofit In Motion.
Locomotion.
Yeah,
Locomotion. Anyway, and he was really great. And he was talking about this concept. He wants to have a conference of Steal That Idea, where everybody just sort of presents these things that have been successful that they've tried and shares how they've actually executed on it. And as you were talking about Stewart MRV, I was like, God, this is actually a really cool opportunity for not just sort of towns to look inward and, you know, bring their community members into the fold, but also for towns to learn from each other. And maybe there's even a way to formalize that. I don't know, but I just had to say it because I had this idea and I got excited about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you,
So
Cora.
on that note, thank you so much. I really appreciate your including me in the meeting, and I hope you all have a great evening.
You as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay, next item 7, member roundtable. We have 30 minutes allocated.
I thought it was gonna
So
be-
I'd like each of you to talk for.
I was just looking at that. I thought it
We
was
have
gonna be
30
a
minutes,
longer
so it's
period,
gonna
but.
take, it's gonna take 30 minutes, sorry. Go ahead, Eric, you have.
Well,
you
we're
have-
working on the B app a lot, and it's, no, it's really, like I said, it's the serendipity of some of this stuff is really awesome. And, people really do want to get involved, and they also, and I think the chamber is, you know, we are not your typical chamber of commerce, we're just not, and, I see this as, you know, another example of how we're doing things the Mad River way. And, doing things in a unique and different way that is appealing hopefully to other businesses. And so that businesses aren't looking at, you know, what do I get for this? Why am I spending $400 to be a member of this organization? If businesses aren't taking part in these kinds of things, you know, they're missing out on, you know, helping our community grow in these different ways, you know. Seeing what we've done with, you know, this rec hub is taking off. I mean, there are people down there every goddamn day. People are using that bathroom, people are parking down there. When people went to the No Kings rally over in Bristol, I think it was in Bristol, they parked there. And because they knew we don't have a community parking lot. And now we do. And they were using the bathrooms and they were so excited that, oh my God, they walk into that thing and it's like the Taj Mahal of outhouses. And it
really
is.
is.
You've been in it, right? Like,
It's really nice.
and you know, it's just awesome. And so all of this stuff is happening. People are coming into the Welcome Center. I had no less than 15 people come in today. I know it's not a huge number, but it's like, they walk out of there like, this community has it freaking going on. I mean, it's really cool, and so we are the outward facing, which we just never had before. And it's really, really, it's working, so, you know, we're doing that, we're working really hard with getting our sectors to work, various business sectors to work more closely together. We have, ongoing meetings with our restaurant, retail and lodging group meet, weekly. The restaurant people less frequently because that's hurting cats. But they are really working together, and one of the great things that we've created, with the retail folks is a, retail planning, or we're not necessarily limited to retail, but a business planning calendar. So it's an inward facing calendar that is designed for the business community and the, municipalities to use, that has everything laid out in a calendar form and as a spreadsheet for the entire year. You know, from obviously all the, you know, typical holidays, but National Beer Day, you know, the, Norwich graduation weekend, Norwich homecoming weekend, anything that is like going on regularly, people know about it, the Waitsfield skiing the swap sale, like all those kinds of things. Putting that on there onto a calendar so that they can see it. And so that the idea being that if someday boutique says, oh, wow, the Norwich, homecoming weekend is this weekend, we're gonna have a sidewalk sale. And that hopefully will encourage the other businesses to say, oh, wow, she's doing that. We could do that and, you know, do the same thing, and that, oh, everyone on Bridge Street is doing this thing, so that then they can promote it and it's planned further in advance. And doing the same thing, you know, the various different neighborhoods and encourage, you know, like Meadow River Green, they're really coming together. And that's what the chamber is trying to do, is get the business communities, give them a foundation and a forum to work together. And that's what we're working on.
Very cool.
So it's good stuff.
That's a great idea.
And the other thing I just would like to say is, business is not great, just so you know. This businesses are really struggling. Occupancy at the inns and lodges is down. It's down among the STRs. It's not us, it's national. You know, it was funny, I met a gentleman, it was very funny because I was walking down, I was wearing a bathing suit with my towel, and I'm walking towards the new bridge, and the guy comes off on the bike sweating. This is yesterday, he's sweating like, he's like, is there a swim hole right here? And I'm like, nope. And he laughed, and I laughed, and he laughed, and I said, you know, the property owner does not want people swimming here. That's not what this is. This is not a new swim hall.
Right.
And I told him where to go, and he's heading back up, and it turns out that he worked for Traps up in Stowe. Had a really nice conversation with him, ski instructor at Stowe during the winter. And he asked me, he's like, how's business down here? I'm like, yeah, it's not great. And he's like, yeah, it's terrible up there. And so it's not just us, but I think this organization and you folks just need to be aware that businesses are really struggling.
I had lunch with some friends of mine who work at JP a few days ago, same story up there.
Oh, that's even worse up there.
Yeah.
Steve Wright, the president up there, is a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
And he was, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
They're down like, their season pass sales among Canadians, you know, they sell all their passes in the
Yes.
spring,
Yeah,
down 80%. 80, and that's half their business.
yeah. Yeah,
So that's like 40%
yeah,
in season passes. That, you know, from ski industry guy, that is a monumental number.
yeah. And the summer rentals, I guess, of the condos up there are way down,
Yeah.
too, what I heard.
Yeah, and the hockey rink, and people aren't, you know, they, I think more than half of their business at the hockey rink is Canadian teams coming down,
Yeah,
and they're just not coming, and I don't freaking blame them.
yeah.
We went to Montreal on July 4th. Because we wanted to like show our support that way, and we were so welcomed, it was awesome.
Yeah.
And we made a point of like saying like, we're sorry.
Yeah.
This,
The people I had lunch with are
Mhm.
Canadians
Mhm.
who work at JP.
Yeah.
So this is where I was getting the information
Yeah.
from. Yeah,
so, it's just a reality check.
yeah,
The Cape is the same way, and like I have a connection down there, it's not great.
Yeah.
And I worry about it, because I think a lot of people here are second homeowners, there's a lot of wealthy people around here that just don't freaking get it.
Hmm.
And, and they're complaining about, how come the service is so terrible, and they're in, can't freaking find or afford employees,
Hmm.
and it sucks.
Hmm.
Thank you, Eric.
Yep.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I wish I had, more exciting things to share, but our sort of current situation in the planning commission in Waitsfield is we are trying to come to a close on the first part of our master planning process in Irisville. We've had some really great public input from all of you. I think we have some really excellent ideas. We are currently working with A&R actually, and trying to get some hopefully clearer answers about sort of how much the town can do to help ease the path for development in Irisville. Which it was interesting to hear that there's such an emphasis on the infill mapping for the river corridors. I would love if that were the case also for some of our low performing wetlands, because that's what we're running up against, is that we have wetlands maps that suggest that most of Irisville is some form of wetland. It's been very hard to get any permitting done in there. And one of the things that various owners have been told is that because there's no overall plan for those wetlands, it's really hard to do. It's hard for them to permit one-off permits. And now as we're getting through this process, we're finding that A&R is just not built to do that, to support that larger scale planning, and we're having a hard time getting real firm answers about what that can look like. And so we're still working. We're going to be making more outreach at sort of higher levels within A&R is sort of the next plan. But we're not really sure exactly what that looks like yet. So our current status there is basically just working with the SE Group consultants to try to figure out a strategy to consult with the various state agencies that have real sort of skin in the game for meeting the governor's priorities and the state's priorities around development and housing, while still supporting the ecological goals of A&R. And so we're trying to do a little bit of, I don't know, I guess marketing of that idea to the agency to try and get the point across that.
It's frustrating that that's still so difficult,
Yeah,
considering how the legislature and the governor have both
yeah,
said housing is an enormous priority.
yeah, it is. And I mean, it comes back, I think, to the same problem with the river corridor, which is that the historical settlement patterns of Vermont are not conducive to, long-term flood and water management, best practices. But because they're historical settlement patterns, it's very hard to move away from them when you're trying to pitch to the public, where are we gonna do dense development? And just logistically, we could site new development in higher ground that's nowhere near the river. But they're not gonna have access to water, wastewater, they won't be close to, existing business communities, it's gonna be fracturing further what we have.
Right.
And so it makes sense to, identify the least impact we can have. And yeah, unfortunately, our initial outreach to A&R was not as productive as we hoped, so we're still optimistic that future outreach will get us there. We've got until November to finalize this section of this, or to use this grant and to get a final product. We're hoping to roll that into a second grant. The program allows for up to 2 grants in a certain time frame. And assuming we can make progress with A&R about what the outcome of this, what the work product could be and what it could do to help landowners to move forward with development plans. The goal is to sort of design a second phase of this master planning project to getting that product. And my hope personally, and I think, it would make the most sense, would be, is there some degree of hydrological study we can do that would, because as we've been told many times, and if any of you have properties that are on wetlands buffer adjacent areas, the burden is on the landowner to show that there is not a hydrological link between their wetland and the sort of downstream flood risk. Which is one element of what they look at for permitting. So if there's anything the town can do to give landowners some reliable study that shows that their property being part of this larger area is not hydrologically linked to the Mad River in a way that would increase flood risk by doing whatever, or at least having some idea of what level of encroachment in buffer areas would not have that type of impact.
Or the other way is how doing these projects might enhance
And that's.
by
the other side of
working
it.
together.
Exactly, and that's, and part of that too is that like this whole master plan also considers enhancing the wetlands that are shown to be functional. And that are doing a good job of sequestering water during heavy rain events. So trying to, the ideal outcome would be that A&R agrees with us that the town can and should produce this kind of work product that would allow owners to rely on something they don't have to pay for themselves, they don't have to engage engineers, they have to delay their projects. So that would be the ideal, so we can commission that study can be used by the various stakeholders to move forward with development plans, and so that remains our hope, and I think it's still a reasonable hope, but it is gonna be unfortunately a little bit more of a rocky road getting from here to there. So that's, again, the master planning project remains our biggest focus of the planning commission. The one thing I did wanna just touch on though is, very related to, what Sam was saying earlier about the very early nascent stages of considerations around an LOT potentially for Waitsfield, which I don't have any insight into whatsoever, but I do know that Waitsfield is participating in this it's a very long name, the Vermont Local Level Outdoor Recreation Economic Impact Toolkit, which is a project by the Tourism Board and then one or two other agencies.
Yeah.
Boric and
Yeah,
Well-
no, Vermont Outdoor,
Right.
Business, VOBA.
Oh,
Vermont
VOBA as well,
Business
okay.
Association,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
we're a member of them as well.
Okay, excellent. And so
They're really great.
yeah, I mean, it seems like so. As far as what exactly comes out of this process for what, what the toolkit gives, I don't know yet. I don't think any of us know yet how valuable it's gonna be on an ongoing basis. But I do know that it's gonna give us a lot of information about how much sales tax and use tax are being collected for outdoor recreation. Which goes directly to if anyone in, certainly in Waitsfield, because that's where it's starting, but assuming this rolls out sort of valley-wide. Every town's gonna have a much better sense of what would an LOT actually do. What kinds of numbers are we talking about? And then to the marketing piece of it. What does that mean for what the town can do to accomplish its goals? And I think the one thing that's on my mind, and again, I don't have special insight in here. But when I look at like the funding environment for a wastewater project today, which is not what it was when the bond vote passed. I start to think, what are alternative ways that we can finance a project like that? And this looks like an opportunity to at least explore, is this a way that our community could meet its needs without having to hope that the federal government magically changes its mind about how to fund things in the next year, which I just don't think is realistic. So I am actually excited about, I mean, I've been excited about this thing, but this impact toolkit, but having seen a little bit of what's in that data set or what they're trying to collect, it looks like it could be hugely valuable for those discussions because it gives real concrete numbers and could really help to tie, our town's needs, right, our infrastructure needs to a funding source that, yes, it is tied to spending and that includes people in the town, but we can also show how much of that is gonna come out of the outdoor recreation economy, which I think, it is a relatively easy sell to people to say, right now, the state gets 100% of the tax revenue from that activity. We are not seeing a dime of the sales and use tax from the outdoor recreation. We certainly benefit in other ways.
Or rooms and meals.
Or rooms and meals, yeah, so there's a ton of tax revenue that goes directly to the state. That is derived from the activities that go on here that so much of our community is involved in. But we don't capture any of, and I do know that when this sort of project kicked off and people have been talking with people from, I guess there was a group from Montana, was it that?
Yeah, there was partnering with SC Group, but I can't remember their name.
Yeah, and I guess, they were apparently sort of shocked that there aren't LOTs in the valley. Because that is how you capitalize on an economy like this, to get
Yep,
local funding, so.
What a concept.
I know, it's
nothing
shocking.
like a botched rollout of a great idea.
Yeah, so, but I'm hopeful that this is a second bite, that we'll have, you know, a new set of eyes. I mean, look, the bond vote went through for wastewater. You know, and 10 years ago, I don't think anyone would have thought that would happen, so I think we do have a different environment now, and I think that it's so much of it is marketing, so much of it is just meeting people where they are, and people are angry that taxes are so high generally, because they don't know, like, why are we paying for everything, and we're paying more for everything all the time. At least with this, there's a, you know, a very clear tie between our community needs X, Y, and Z, and this is a funding stream to get there, and there's no other alternative.
And 30% still goes to the state.
Oh, I know, it's not ideal, but it's better than zero. Which is, unfortunately where
Yeah,
we
it's that
start.
marketing idea, people are gonna have a hard time with that 30%.
Yeah,
They really do. I mean,
Yeah.
and I get it, but it's.
it's hard, yeah. So anyway, that's it for the planning commission. The
Thanks, John.
small issues like that.
Just easy, easy peasy. Chuck?
I guess. The one new thing that's just recently came out with regard to the flooding, we completed a couple of our major projects. That put them into the final phase of FEMA funding. And then we find out that, the Secretary of Homeland Security announced that she is gonna have to look at all FEMA projects over $100,000 before they get approved. So naturally, our projects are over $100,000. So we've inquired as to whether or not we can break the projects down into segments that would be less than $100,000 to speed up our payment. And it turns out that we would have to start from ground zero for the approval process for each of the individual projects, so that's a worse scenario. So we're,
How can they possibly do that? That makes no sense.
Well, why don't you just invite her up and you can have her shoot your dog?
it's the government, it's FEMA.
It makes no sense. That's too small a number by a magnitude of 100 or 1,000.
And can you imagine with all of the disasters that have been happening across this country, how many projects fall in the $100,000 plus range? And she's gonna have to review.
In
every-
infinity of them.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, that's the good news for Facein.
That's
I won't bore you with
ridiculous.
the other
Yeah, I'm
update.
really thinking maybe I shouldn't have voted for him.
You having regrets?
Maybe, it's
Maybe,
starting to.
maybe. Yeah, I don't know.
So anyway, that's.
It's all part of the plan, Eric. It's all part of the plan. Don't worry. Oh, thank you, Chuck. Let's see, Warren. The housing stuff Sam talked about, that's kind of one of our focuses. The looters finally have gone, the mapping that came out of CVRPC. They're not approved, but they're finally going to the select board. They've finally gone to the select board for approval. And I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, nothing else too exciting to report.
Let's job on the parade. I
It
heard it was great.
was a good parade. It was a good
Lot of
parade
people
this year. It was, and my son's roommate, who's from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, we kind of warned him, like, this could be, culturally triggering for you. But he was like, you know what, that's he came out really pretty, he loved it and thought it was patriotic. A little more left wing than than maybe in Baton Rouge, but patriotic. Yeah, so it was a good parade.
Just one very quick thing, a reminder, we will not be meeting in August.
What?
We will not be meeting in August. So
Why are
Yes,
you so excited?
September 18th.
We love having you here. Oh, no, it's 9:10.
Yeah,
Oh
that's
my
right.
God, I blew it. Man, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I will second that
All in
wholeheartedly.
favor,
Yes.
please say aye. I failed. I always want to. Okay, we're adjourned, folks. It's 9:11 PM. Sorry.